When the Honda Civic Type R came out a few years ago, I proclaimed it to be the best front-wheel drive car on sale at the time, and in general a fantastic use of about 35 grand if you needed a car that can do a bit of everything pretty well. However, it did have a few weak points, and that's why I'm very excited today to drive this modified Type R, because the owner of this car, a friend of mine, Adrian, says he's worked out the bugs. But can you make the best even better? Well, today we're gonna find out, and this is gonna be a lot of fun. Let's go back to the basics. What makes a Type R a Type R? Well, the FK8 chassis is an evolution of the, well, Civic hatchback, the 10th gen Civic hatchback. Great bones, independent suspension all around, struts up front, multi-link out back, very rigid structure. Type R, even more rigid chassis, of course. No sunroof for more lightweight, but the big thing is, of course, for Honda nerds out there, the powertrain. No, it's not a naturally aspirated screamer. It's a high-performance 2-liter turbo, the K20C. In stock form, produces 306 horsepower, which was sent, of course, to the front wheels via this glorious 6-speed manual transmission and limited slip diff out of the box. The powertrain may not be quite as charming as old school Hondas. It doesn't have necessarily a fantastic noise or the most character, but the efficacy is hard to deny. Is so tractable, very easy to chase the power. It has quite a lot of torque all over the power band. The clutch is perfect, nicely weighted, very progressive take up. Anyone can get in this car and drive it very quickly. One complaint, and this is a complaint with a lot of modified cars, not specific to Adrian's case here. The standard shifter on the Type R is fantastic in my opinion. Again, one of the best front drive shifter experiences you will experience. But Adrian's gone ahead and put a short shifter on here, and in general, I hate short shifters because they ruin shift feel on pretty much every car. That said, as far as short shifters go, this is one of the best I've felt, but I suspect that's mainly due to the fact that the stock Type R transmission shifts so nicely out of the box. However, speaking of that powertrain, one of my main complaints with the Civic Type R is that it was just so quiet in stock form. You have this really shouty, aggressive bodywork and all these claims of Nürburgring lap times and things like that. But when you drove it, it was basically silent inside and out. There's no noise to really speak of. It's a common problem with modern turbocharged engines. The manufacturers just make them way too quiet. So despite having 3 fat exhaust tips, you really didn't hear much of anything. Fortunately, that's an issue that Adrian has rectified in his Type R, thanks to a Mishimoto intake system, which has that nice turbocharged induction noise when you lean into it. And then, more crucially, is the 27.1 exhaust system. They make a lot of parts for this platform, and Adrian says it's one of his favorite upgrades to this car, just because it gives the Type R so much more personality. It's a 3-inch catback exhaust, and it really does give this thing not an amazing noise, but a noise nonetheless. It's still very refined, very turbocharged, kind of muffled, kind of that flat warble sound you get from modern turbo engines, but it wakens it up just enough. Now, interestingly, I asked Adrian, he's still on the stock tune, which surprised me quite a lot, because I thought if you throw an intake and an exhaust at really any turbocharged engine these days, you probably had to throw a tune at them. But he says the Type R's factory ECU can adapt enough to these basic bolt-ons and not throw a fuss about it, which is good. If you couldn't already tell from the thumbnail, there's a lot going on in this Civic Type R. The factory bodywork, which is already, by most people's standards, extremely aggressive, is made even more so on this car. The first thing you might have noticed is a huge front splitter, which has some war wounds on it from a recent track day at Buttonwillow. But the big thing that's sure to cause a fuss is the rear spoiler. You see, out of the box, the Type R already has a huge wing from the factory. However, Adrian has swapped it out for a more JDM-inspired Voltex knockoff wing. Yes, it's carbon fiber, but it's not a true Voltex. It's actually a battle aero wing. But it looks fantastic. The carbon wing contrasts nicely against the Aegean blue paint, one of my favorite colors for the Type R. And I like the fact that the wing is so high because it's level with the plane of the roof, which means it should be functional and provide actual downforce. However, Adrian told me he really just likes the aesthetic. He's not out there chasing every possible tenth of a lap time. He's really just here to have a lot of fun with this Type R. One area I really found the Type R shone brightly in stock form was the suspension tuning. Adjustable dampers are standard fare here. There's a drive mode selector down here. You can toggle between Comfort, Sport, and R, or I guess more specifically, Plus R, which is ridiculous. But the drive mode selector does notably change the driving experience in this vehicle. And it is thanks to those shocks. Now, sure, they remap the accelerator pedal and adjust the steering feel a little bit, but the shocks are the biggest difference of all. And I'm happy to report that Adrian has not swapped out the stock shocks in the Type R because, in my opinion, they are just so damn good out of the box. He has, however, lowered this car on a set of springs. The Type R is already pretty low in stock form, but you lower it about an inch or so further, and it just looks like a little touring car. This thing looks like it should be in the BTCC. But because it's just lowering springs on the very good stock shocks, there's very little in the way of trade-offs for day-to-day use. I'm driving this thing in sport mode right now, and it feels fantastic on the road. It's maybe a hair more crashy than a stock Type R, but like I've mentioned before, if you have an everyday car that you want to modify, aftermarket coilover suspension is great for the track, very configurable and adjustable, but you do lose so much of the day-to-day ride comfort versus just an OE size and shape lowering spring and a decent shock, which is effectively what this is. Now, Adrian, like myself, is a bit of a wheel whore. He's gone through several sets of wheels since owning the Type R, I think a solid half dozen at this point. And his current set, his latest pickup, I think are fantastic. He has traded the clownishly large stock 20-inch wheels for a set of 18-inch Regamasters, one of the best looking, in my opinion, JDM wheels you can buy. And yes, these are JDM Regas, not Russian ones. I also like the color. Now, this is actually, funny enough, his second set of Regamasters on this car. The first ones were like a slate gray color and looked nice and subtle. These are a matte white finish, which pops so sharply against the Aegean blue paint. I love it. Again, BTCC touring car vibes. I'm completely here for it. And not only has he stepped down in diameter, but he stepped up in width. Now, the FK8 Civic Type R is blessed with massive wheel wells, which means this thing can fit a huge amount of rubber on it. And I'm happy to report that he has gone with a set of 265 wide tires all around. Now, granted, if this was strictly a track car, you probably want to put like a 305 up front and a 265 in the back, and I bet that would be great. But for everyday use, this is awesome. It's a load of tire. It's more grip than you'd ever need. Now, unfortunately, they are Federal RSRR tires, tires I've talked about on this channel before with my own Project Civic SI. They're a great budget performance tire, but the trade-off is they are hilariously loud. It sounds like this thing has straight cut gears once you're going over about 40 miles per hour because these tires are so damn loud. But that's okay, because for around town driving, man, do they have quite a lot of grip. And they work well to showcase the strong suits of the Type R. Because despite being front-wheel drive, the Type R puts down its power so well. That was one thing I was really amazed about. If you're in second gear, I mean, if you've driven like a Mazda Speed 3, for example, that car is completely useless until you're in like fourth gear because it's just blowing the tires off the whole time. You can really hustle this thing on a winding road, and it's such a good driving partner. It has all the brakes you'd ever need. It has good steering feel for electric power steering. The ride and handling is phenomenal. I mean, he's really lost nothing in modifying this, which is impressive because a lot of times it's very easy to go overboard when modifying a car. Woo-hoo! Look at that, no torque steer. That's amazing. That really shouldn't be possible. I'm not really sure how Honda's managed to do that, but they've done it. It makes me remember why I gushed about this car when it came out a few years ago, because, I mean, despite being a $35,000, I guess nowadays with price premiums, about $40,000 front-wheel drive Honda Civic, it really does just feel so special. The FK8 has that sort of same special feel you get in cars like the Camaro SS1LE and the Mazda Miata. They just feel so special at what they do, and it really makes the driver just feel so good. What makes me feel a bit less good, if I'm completely honest with you, is this seat. Now, the Civic Type R has heavily bolstered seats in stock form. You look at the passenger seat, for example, it's gorgeous. But Adrian, because he's tall and very thin, he looks like a model compared to me, my fat ass. He swapped in a Brid Zeta 3 seat, a JDM seat, nice brand. Very narrow, very tight. You can see I'm squeezing my fat butt in here, but man, is it really tight. And I'm sure this is fantastic on the track, but man, I'm struggling a bit on the street here. That's okay, it's not my car, it's his car. And if he fits, good for him. I do need to lose 20 pounds. While I'm nitpicking, I do want to go back to some Type R foibles. The first is instrumentation. The Civic Type R has the standard gauge cluster you'd find in a 10th gen Civic. However, they've added a few bits of functionality here. They have things like throttle position, brake position, you know, they have the boost gauge, which you can get in a standard Civic Turbo or SI. And they have like a G reader and a stopwatch, and that's all great, but that's not super useful to look down at a glance. What I really wish they would have put here is a real coolant temp gauge. We have the same coolant temp gauge as what you'd find in a regular Civic. It has no numbers or no markings, and same deal. I wish there was like an oil temperature gauge, for example. You know, I wish Honda had added that in the Type R, because this is a 2019. This is the refresh year, but they still didn't add that much useful information for the driver. And the reason why I'm bitching about that is because stock Civic Type Rs will absolutely overheat on you if you do go to the racetrack and have any pace behind your driving at all. I overheated a stock Type R on the Honda press trip. A bunch of the cars on the press trip actually went into limp mode at the track and had to be parked for the day. And that was despite Honda limiting us to going very, very slow on the racetrack and doing a lead-follow style group with a driver who may as well have been cruising in the right lane of I-5 traffic. Fortunately, Adrian has done one of the first must-do upgrades to the powertrain, in addition to the better-sounding intake and exhaust, and added an external oil cooler. That means this thing shouldn't overheat on the track anymore, because that's pretty much what I was telling anyone who asked me about the Civic Type R. Great car for everyday use and track day driving. However, cooling modifications are 100% necessary, whether you want to go oil cooler, bigger radiator, and a turbo intercooler, whatever you got to do, it needs better cooling. And Adrian's told me on the stock intercooler, he still does get a lot of heat soak. So, yeah, I guess I was right about that. I understand why Adrian, a longtime Honda enthusiast, bought the Civic Type R. You see, interestingly, he's gone through a string of vehicles, his most recent one before this actually being a 10th gen Civic Si, and interestingly, it's a common move. A lot of 10th gen Civic Si owners actually end up upgrading to 10th gen Civic Type Rs. It's a very natural progression, and it makes sense, and I see why he did it, because the Civic Type R is just a big step ahead dynamically of the SI. From the powertrain to the capabilities and the overall refinement, it is a much better package if you can afford the price differential. So the driving dynamics are fabulous. Adrian has not really compromised any of the excellent out-of-the-box utility the Civic Type R offers. In fact, I'd say the only thing he's done is made it better. Truly, just like I said in the intro, he's found the weak points and he's addressed them. It sounds better. It runs better because it won't overheat. And if you want to, he's added enough goodies to make this thing truly, truly capable on the track. Adrian himself admits he's nowhere near the limits of what this car can do, but he's having fun finding his ability and finding the limits as he progresses as a driver on the racetrack. And that's what makes this car so exciting, because once you do throw a few basic mods at this thing, it's ready to go. This has all the capability you'd ever need to set brutally fast lap times and really teach you how to drive quickly on the racetrack and how to do it right. So man, Adrian, first up, thank you for letting me drive your car, dude. It's been a blast. I like the Civic Type R out of the box, and I love your modified example because it's fun to drive stock. It's more fun when you modify it. So did Adrian make the best better, and is that possible with the Civic Type R? Well, clearly it is. So guys, thank you very much for watching my review of this modified Type R. It's been a blast to drive this thing, even down here in Orange County where the police are everywhere and there's tons of traffic. I think that's all I got for this one, guys. My name is Jake. You've been watching Drive, Brake, Fix, Repeat, and I'll see you guys next time where I go do more fun things with cars. Bye.